qualities of democratic competences. So what is the context and the rationale for the project? Well, I'm not saying anything new here, that states in Western Europe, in America, and also in Eastern Europe have experienced democratic backsliding. The governments are less, particularly in some countries in Eastern Europe, are less democratic than they were before. And also we have the arrival of populist nationalism in Western Europe, which sometimes also doesn't take, let's say, the mores and rules of the rule of law and democracy terribly seriously. And governments have then, well, started to think about, well, how can we curb this trend, democratic backsliding? And they've looked then as to education as a way to curb this trend. And what is then interesting is that you do not really find any instrument available in existing research that allows you to have a very good and quick assessment of how well a national education system promotes democratic competences, like some kind of, say, composite index. Whereas you do have this for kind of adjacent policy fields, like, say, migrant integration. We have the well-known Migrant Integration Policy Index, for instance. We also have very good indices measuring the quality of democracy, like the Freedom House Index, or the work that Swedish colleagues are doing in the University of Gothenburg, the varieties of democracy indices, but nothing really that captures the way that education is promoting democratic competences. So that was the rationale for this project. And luckily, we managed to persuade the Leverhulme Trust to fund it. So what are the aims then? Well, the first aim we already talked about. So it's simply developing this Education for Democracy Index. And this will be an index with measures and indicators, a whole set of indicators relating to different educational fields that are providing national level data. So it will be geared at the characteristics of national education systems, policies, practices, and institutional characteristics. And we're now in the process of reviewing the literature on how education can promote democratic dispositions to identify all these different aspects of an education system. That's the rationale for this literature review. And Adrian will be talking more about that. Once we have developed that index, and we'll also be seeking expert opinions on this from a variety of organizations. It's very nice that Bryony has now also secured the cooperation of somebody from the Council of Europe to join our advisory board, so we can also benefit from feedback of her and other experts. So once we've developed that index, then there are two things we want to do with it. First is to assess how the index is related to political and cultural traditions. We might say its antecedents. Well, why would we want to do that? Well, in a way, I would hope that this index is actually not strongly related to these political and cultural traditions. Because if it is, then it suggests that the education system is hard to reform in order to make it more, let's say, conducive for the promotion of democratic values. Whereas if it's not tightly related to political traditions, let's say, to a country's history of democracy, then that would suggest that there's ample room for reforming the education system to make it more conducive for democratic outcomes, to create democratic outcomes. So that's the idea behind that research question. The third research question, well, that will be then about, or the research aim, is whether the index is related to young people's democratic dispositions. And maybe here I pass the word on to Bryony as one of the team members.
Yes, at this point then we're going to be looking at indicators or indexes similar to what I did many years ago when I worked at the European Commission in terms of creating indexes on the outcomes on dispositions and civic values, attitudes. But instead of just keeping them as a simple ranking, we'll probably create an index where we look at it in terms of inequalities of outcomes for different groups, and see then if we can see a link between a good education system, or good in terms of democratic policies, and if this relates to the indexes or civic outcomes.
Exactly. And so what are then the project details? Well, it's been funded for 4 years, so quite happy with that. That's a really nice long time. So we can look at, investigate these issues quite thoroughly. We'll be using mostly existing data sources, particularly relying on the Eurydice reports of the European Union on citizenship education, and on the ICCS studies. So those are these big international surveys among teenagers, but they also survey teachers and school principals, so tapping the civic attitudes of young people in a whole set of countries. And that source is particularly useful for also assessing how well these measures and these policies are actually implemented in schools. So the good thing about our index is that it's also capturing this component of implementation in schools, which few of these kind of policy indexes do. The team is, Adrian, Bryony, and me, and the outputs of the project are, you can read them there in the slides, but what I should really mention is this website. I'm really keen to have a good website showing this index with also all the sub-dimensions presented in nice infographics, because I think that will greatly stimulate its uptake. I know from other indices, again, the MIPEX comes to mind, Migrant Integration Policy Index, but also the Multiculturalism Policy Index and those VDEM indexes, that they can really attract a lot of attention just by presenting this information in a very accessible and transparent way. So that's a really important output. As well, of course, we'd like to make then the index database available. So with all the data hanging under these indicators and dimensions, as many as 6 research papers we'd like to write, and a book synthesizing the whole project. Perhaps at this stage, let me pass the word then on to you, Adrian.
Great.
Yeah. Yes.
Stop. Oh, change that. Stop it. I'll say stop. Just stop. Share it. And then share.
Oh, yeah.
Go back to sharing.
If you go to Windows.
You go to present, if you go to the three buttons on the side, top, up, down, yeah, present.
Excellent. Oh, all right. Thank you. I just want to reiterate my gratitude for letting us present here. So this part of the presentation is going to focus on the ongoing literature review. And change. So it's the overall goal of this literature review is to assist in the development of a comprehensive and multidimensional index that captures the manner and degree of a country's educational policies that promote democratic dispositions. And some of the examples I already mentioned, and you strive to achieve both in its quality, impact, and accessibility is VDEM and this migrant integration policy index. And really this literature is going to serve as this theoretical framework that will then act as the basis for the foundation of the methodological framework when we in terms of considering weighing or aggregation, very critical steps in developing composite index. So specifically for this presentation, it's going to focus on the meta findings. So just some quick some background in order to establish the parameters of literature review. So it covers between 2000 and 2023. And these are some of the databases that we have been looking at, although we hope to expand beyond these, but so far this is what we searched on. And the criteria is that it has to be empirical research, peer-reviewed journal, students from primary to higher education, and it's focusing on citizenship or citizenship education. So citizenship education is a very diverse field, and so far we have broken it down into these 7 different subfields. With these are some examples of some of the different variables that we've encountered when it comes to measuring these different these different educational fields. And the dispositions that we're interested in it's based on this reference framework of competencies for democratic culture produced by the Council of Europe, and that's attitudes, behavior, knowledge, skills, and values. And you can see some of the different ways that we encounter in the literature of measuring these different competencies. So there are about 22 unique studies, and emphasis on unique. Some of these studies look at multiple different educational fields, like curriculum. A lot of times you'll see studies look at curriculum and pedagogy at the same time. And just a broad overview of the findings from this literature review is that a lot of the emphasis is on pedagogy, curriculum, attainment, with limited work on training and assessment. When it comes to the competencies, attitudes are the most studied, with the least amount of attention being given to skills. And so overall, and this will be detailed in the following slides, there is this meta-positive link between citizenship education and democratic competencies with notable variations, and some of those variations will be shown in a few minutes. This is it. This gives you a nice overview of the different count of studies that we so far have collected. So the top 3, again, pedagogy, curriculum, attainment. And I also want to emphasize that system characteristics and ethos are still very much under development, so this should not be seen as an estimate of the true count of potential studies that look at this education field. So training, assessment haven't received as much attention. with notable exceptions. So the aggregate number of studies by democratic competencies, again, attitudes are and make up the largest share of competencies being studied, with skills not so much. Intersection of both of those graphs. So it's the percentage of studies by educational fields across democratic competencies. And some of the observable patterns from this graph is that when it comes to behavior, attainment really has maybe a disproportionate share of its attention on behavior. And this is mostly voting from what we've come across. The same goes for skills. There seems to be a disproportionate emphasis when it comes when those studying training, teacher training. And there also seems to be a proportional emphasis within pedagogy and curriculum. Moving on to the meta findings. I mean, maybe it shouldn't be surprising that there is this positive association. It's this bias towards publishing of positive findings is not unique to this discipline. But I think it does give a good indicator that there is a relationship here. And what I mean by mixed findings is potentially different one indicator or one educational field had maybe null results in one country and positive results in another country. So it's under mix, as well as studies that find a non-linear relationship. So looking at the percentage of results across different educational fields, there's some notable patterns. The first is that assessment tends to be somewhat mixed compared to the other fields. And when it comes to attainment, there seems to be this large null result. And I think this reflects the large and sometimes passionate debates around the effect of years of education on someone's probability of voting, which goes back many, many years. And I think that's captured here. But we can also see that pedagogy, I think it does a good job of capturing what we already know, is that practices like open classroom climate, mock election, debate clubs, that these really do have an impact on democratic dispositions. So moving on to the next one. This one I think provides maybe a little less information, but still relevant, is that again, this null finding, not null finding, but this large share of null findings for when it comes to behavior. And the following slides look at each educational field and the intersection of the different competencies and the results. So there's a clear positive consistent finding across when it comes to curriculum, maybe some slight less consensus around knowledge, maybe behavior as well. This also plays out when it comes to pedagogy, as I mentioned before, maybe with some slight mixed findings when it comes to behavior. And here, for this, if you notice, I removed skills. I think there's one or two studies, and it's all, I think, positive, if I remember, but it washed out some of the results, so it's a little easier if we just removed it. And again, we can sort of see that the debate surrounding behavior play out here, especially when it comes to voting, or sort of any sort of political practices like signing petitions, registering to vote if you're in the U.S. Yeah. So training, teacher training, which is previously hasn't been as surveyed in other literature reviews, we can see again this consistent finding of positive results or positive findings. assessment, and I should also mention that assessment, there's not many studies. If you recall from one of the first graphs, it was about 15 studies. So this should be considered when interpreting these findings. And the same can be said for ethos, which I won't delve too into. It's very small right now, the number of count studies we have. And one thing to remark on when it comes to system education, characteristics of the system, is that the negative findings oftentimes is what we would expect from past research on tracking and how it can exacerbate inequalities. Concluding, this literature review, I think, examines greater forms of practices along a wide range of democratic dispositions. And something that's not examined here, but that we are very much interested in is how these educational fields are related to inequalities of such dispositions. So thank you, and we look forward to the discussion ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. We can stop the share so they can see us. Thank you so much. And so now we will move on to we forgot. We're so used to the online version. It's like, oh, there's people here. I'm not at my desk. So thank you all. Thank you both so much for a detailed and informative presentation. And so right now we'll go on to the question and answer and discussion portion. If you have a question in the room, raise your hand. If you're online, you can also raise your digital hand. And we'll have a sort of informal discussion if you ask any clarifying questions or anything that you want to know about their project. Okay, so we have Emma. Oh, we have Sarah, and I think we have an online.
That's the online.
Yeah.
So they can participate.